Johnson. I saw this gal.
Hello. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Yeah. All right, we're going to get started tonight.
Yeah, Uncle Sam is
We got a few announcements, and then we'll take prayer requests. The ice cream sign up for Sundays on Wednesdays is on the Welcome Center. So if you would like to provide the ice cream for our after Bible class snack, please do so. I think there's only maybe 3 or 4 spots left on that sign up. Remember this coming Sunday is our graduation celebration. We're going to be honoring 7 of our high school seniors as they graduate. So please bring a side or a main dish to share for the potluck afterwards, and plan on staying around and listen to us parents embarrass our children. So,
We get to do that.
it's always a fun time. Remember the Kate's card to sign, as they're going to be moving away soon. So be sure to leave them a note on there. That's also on the Welcome Center. And then email went out this afternoon about a former member, Colleen Maroney. I don't know if she was here when I was here, right?
She was here last fall.
Last fall she came?
Before we left. I saw her before we left.
Okay. But she passed away, and her memorial service will be at the building here Friday at 11 o'clock. if you are able to attend. Those are all the announcements that I believe I have. Any prayer requests? Nothing. Henry, you got nothing?
I'll pray anyway. Pray with me.
It'll be
Oh,
after the
that's right.
Devo.
I'll pray now and I'll pray then. I'll pray for prayers.
You got a couple minutes to.
I'll think of something.
Yeah, come up with something. But all right, then we'll have our song led by Jacob, and then I'll have the 90 seconds of faith, and then we'll get the aforementioned prayer. If I can. Let's sing.
For the light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine, fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. Lord, I come to your awesome presence from the shadows into your radiance. By the blood I may enter your brightness. Search me, try me, consume all my darkness. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. As we gaze on your kingly brightness, so our faces display your likeness, ever changing from glory to glory. Mirrored here, may our lives tell your story. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit,
Do you guys know what spelunking is? Anyone ever gone spelunking before? Troy, why is your hand so high there? It's fun. The spelunking is fun. Oh. I have, some people think that I have a fear of heights. I don't. I have a respect for heights. But yes, the thing that I actually my phobia though is claustrophobia, of being in tight spaces. I don't know if it's just because I'm a large individual, and so the idea of being in a tight space I don't like. When I got out of the military, right before they were going to send me to survival school, where you get tortured and like put into, I've been told that one of the ways they torture you is they put you in like a 55-gallon barrel and then put the top on. And so, yeah, I got out. I got out of the military. Don't want that at all. And so the spelunking, there's these videos that I don't know how or why they show up on my timeline in my videos, because those videos, just watching them, I start sweating. All right, where it's going through caves. It's cave diving, or you're just exploring through caves. Because there's certain times when these spelunkers go through a very small crevice there where you have to exhale all of the air out of your lungs and then kind of pull yourself through. And I mean, people have gotten stuck in these caves, and I just know that if I were to do this, I would be the one that got stuck. Okay, and that, my friends, is a phobia. that's a fear. It might be completely irrational, but cave diving, I never ever want to experience something like that. If I can't stand up and put my arms around in the air, I don't need to be in that space. Imagine a cave, though. This is my kind of cave. Imagine a cave so big and so expansive that not only does it contain its own lake and its own river system and its own waterfall within that river system, there's a cave in Vietnam that has its own jungle growing inside of it. It's called the, Hang Son Doong. In Vietnam. It is about 600 feet below the surface of the earth, and so it's a good ways down there. But this cave is 5.5 miles long, and most of the caverns in it, you could fly a 747 through these caverns. It's so big and so expansive. You could fit 40-story skyscrapers into some of these caverns. And a man, they didn't even know that this existed until 1991, because there's certain portions of it that are open to the light. Obviously, if you have a jungle growing in there, it's going to need light somehow. It was stumbled upon by a man in 1991, and then he lost it. He didn't know how to get back to this cave, and it was lost for another 20 years. Something that big being lost in our world. And so now it is a big destination for spelunkers to go into. And I can't help but look at things like that and think of the fact that the creativity of our God is just endless. Of coming up with something like that even a cave system can be just beautiful. And sometimes I think we lose sight of that in our world. And we're going to get to this section in Job eventually in our sermon series, but I thought I would read this section here as God is talking to Job in chapter 38, verses 4 through 7. It says, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk, and who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy." I think sometimes as we view creation, we need to just stand back and be in awe of our faithful and amazing Creator God that we have. Henry, you want to close this out in prayer?
We come before you now and ask that you continue to guide us and strengthen us, strengthen our faith in your creation and its awesomeness. And we ask that you be with all of us tonight. Help us to glean something from the lesson that we can use in our daily lives. And we ask that you, a special prayer for Rita Wood's family, the death of her mom and Zelma, and we pray for that family, and also the Joe Williams' mother, Marilyn, who passed away. We just ask, Lord, that you remember their family as they grieve. And on a positive note, Lord, we just want to ask you to encourage Chase and Megan as they move to Mississippi in the hot Mississippi weather. You be with them down there and encourage them and as they move to a new phase. And Lord, we ask that you be with the doctors tomorrow with Caroline's surgery, and ask that you give them the knowledge and ability to do a great job on her cataract surgery, Lord. And we just we ask that you be with all of us as we go through daily struggles. Help us to remember to put you first, Lord, and to pray continually and rejoice in our salvation, that Jesus came and died on the cross for us. And help us to keep that first in our minds. In Jesus' name, amen.
So instant story. And they lowered It's controlling that door.
All right. This is our second to last parable. I won't be here next week. So Dan will be covering our last parable, which will be the parable of the Good Samaritan. I thought I would take it easy on him and give him that one. And I get the one we're going to talk about tonight. But before we get to it, I want to talk about prayer. And just see What does everyone's prayer habits look like? Are you a daily prayer? Do you keep a prayer journal? Do you are you a morning, noon, and night prayer type person? What do people do to pray?
Before meals.
Before meals? Absolutely. That's always a good reminder, right? Of like, I'm about to eat something. Oh yeah, pray. Absolutely. Go.
I clasp my hands and close my eyes. No.
Do you not do that?
No. Not this.
See, I had growing up Episcopal. It was like that's what you did, right? Our pews had little rollers that came down, and you knelt in those, and hands come up, and you clasp them, and you'd say your the rehearsed prayers and stuff like that. So after I became a Christian, that was one habit that I had a hard time breaking. That it's just like, I agree. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's also like praying like this and praying like this. There's really no difference. What else?
I pray during the times when I'm doing chores, like pulling wheat. That's my favorite. It's going outside and I'm pulling wheat, and then I start praying. I don't know.
Well, we could help you. We have a lot of weeds in our yard.
Yeah. You better come over and start praying. Lord, help me.
Prayer weeding.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyone else?
Therapeutic.
Yeah, Rob?
Mornings usually on the way to work, or even try to be the first one up, just to kind of get the day off right. Just be away from everyone and just take that time to just be thankful.
Be in the stillness of the morning.
The calm before the storm.
Oh yeah, calm before the storm. Go ahead.
Random prayer, and by that I mean you're doing whatever you're doing, and that stray thought comes through your mind about so and so, or this over here or that over there. Just taking a few seconds and stopping and addressing that while it's on your mind, because I don't know how your brain works, but mine, things don't stick around too long usually. They're fleeting. And I'm on to whatever comes next.
Oh, for sure. Sure. Karen?
Back in the good old days when I could walk, I used to take a walk for a couple of miles, and I started off by listening to music because I thought it made me walk faster. And I had a girlfriend from the church in Rock Springs tell me that when she walks, that was her time to pray and talk to God. So I learned that. I started turning off the music and taking that time to talk to God. It's really nice outside while you're walking.
When was the good old days?
Well, about 4 months ago.
Okay. Kelly, you had your hand, right?
Well, I was just going to say I try to remember to pray when I'm anxious. I should be more consistent with it, but I had a work evaluation this week, and I prayed a lot. Because I was like, why am I so anxious? I need to just take this to God and leave it at His throne,
Narissa?
When I was a kid, I went to the Zelo. It was like a private Catholic school, and we were in the practice of praying every time we heard emergency vehicles. It was just what everybody did.
Oh.
And so still as an adult, if I hear sirens, I pray for whoever it's going for.
Yeah. We did the same thing at Bear Valley. Bear Valley, it's not like a super busy street, but it is in Denver, so like every street is pretty busy. But it was, if we heard a siren, drive past the building, is either we don't know what this is. So if someone's hurt, let them be healed, and if someone needs justice, let it come swiftly. Missy, you had your hand.
Pray at a lot of different times, kind of like what he was saying. Just somebody comes to mind, and you just pray for them. But one of the strangest times that I pray is in the middle of the night. If I get up to go to the bathroom, or if something wakes me up, I cannot go back to sleep. I fall asleep very fast the first time, but the second time it never happens. So I just take that time to pray, because I know I'm going to be awake for a long time. And so I'm never interrupted. There's never a distraction of any sort. And I can pray. I can focus.
Yeah. I'm the same way. If I wake up after 3 o'clock, I can't go back to bed. So I don't pray. I just sit there. Maybe I should start praying during that time. That'd be a better use of my time. Alicia, so she does the prayer walk thing, but she has it's not a treadmill, but it's like a treadmill for walking. That it doesn't go it only goes up to like 3 miles an hour or something like that. But in front of her is this big cork board where she has sticky notes just pinned all over the thing. And so she says she walks until she's gotten through every single one of those prayers. I thought that was really cool. Let me ask you this. In your prayer life, what do you wish you did better? Nirsa?
Stop asking and give more thanks.
Okay.
Sometimes I put myself on suspension for asking.
You've reached your quota.
Yeah, I just feel bad about it. Like,
no more asking for things for 2 days. Phil?
Consistency.
Consistency.
More often.
More often.
Not always in the bad times.
Yeah, not always in the bad times. Rod?
Keep focused.
During your prayer? Yeah, I hear that. I start praying, and then, I mean, you guys hear me preach, so I chase rabbits all over the place, and then we come back to God, what was I talking about?
Thinking of what Narissa said, I one time heard, and so I tried to follow this. When I pray, I start off by praising God. I never go into myself. Then I go into thanking Him for a lot of things. Last, it's me, what I need help with.
Does anybody have what I would call canned prayers? That you pray the same thing for whatever it is? Yeah, John?
It's usually that I try to go through the Lord's Prayer, but then try to customize it.
Supplement your own stuff.
Because
for the thing.
sometimes I don't know what to pray for. Maybe it's just because my mind's blank a lot of time. I don't know.
True. Kelly?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I do say the Lord's Prayer, but not in a rote kind of way. Like I actually stop and focus on each and every, because it is the perfect prayer. It truly is. It covers everything. Yeah. And like John said, sometimes you don't remember, or you're not sure what you should pray that night, or whenever you're praying. The Lord's Prayer is a good starting point, anyway.
I agree. I have my canned prayer. Not that I don't mean it every time that I pray it, but before I preach, every time. It's pretty much, although sometimes it's out of order. It's just whatever comes to my mind first. Just for that, God would speak through me, and then I go into Thanksgiving of for the talents and abilities that He's given me. Scripture is full of exhortations to pray. That's probably not news to anyone in this room. Just a few I've listed down here. James 5:16, the last part of it anyways. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. Or Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 11. It says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks it will be opened. For which of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Or later on in Matthew 21, verse 22, it says, and whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. Or over in 1 John 5, 14 through 15, it says, and this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the requests that we have asked of him. But here's the, I don't know if you want to call this a problem. It is a thing, that our prayers are not always answered speedily. That we have to wait. At least, it's not answered on our timetable. So let me ask you this. Why do you think God delays in answering our prayers?
Because he's God and he knows all things and he knows what's best.
God knows what's best. You think about our kids asking for things that they might think is the best thing in the world, but we can see that if we were to say yes or to give it to them right away, that might actually do more harm than good. God knows best. Rob?
Will determines when it's best for us. So in his plan, it's not for us. We want everything now.
Yeah.
He's not going to give it to us now. When we need it the most in his eyes, that's when he presents it.
Bill?
My dad used to really irritate me. Some of you knew my dad, but he was one of these guys that wouldn't make a decision. And so we'd go ask Mom, and she'd say, well, go ask Dad. Well, we knew what he was going to say. He would say maybe. Every time he would say maybe. Maybe that's what God's doing to us. Maybe you'll get this. Maybe. Then he'd come later and tell us an answer, but at that time he'd always say maybe because he didn't want to make a decision. So maybe that's why God does it to us. Don't get in a hurry. Just take your time.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Narissa?
To strengthen our faith.
Yeah.
So if we don't get what we want right away and get that instant gratification, we just stay with him and say, I don't get it, but here I am.
Yeah. Megan?
I think sometimes too is we think that we have a specific answer of what we want in mind, and he does answer our prayers, just maybe not the way that we expected. So our envision of what we asked for, but he gives us it through something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Phil?
Also, I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I think of something that I want. I ask God for it, don't get an answer, and before he answers or whatever, I've already decided that wasn't a good thing to ask for.
Yeah.
So it could be he just wants us to think about what we're asking for.
Yeah. When you think about who we are, we can be so fickle at times where we're like, oh, I really need this, but then something else comes along and we're like, no, I guess God, no, I really need that. And God created us; He knows how we operate, and we are not all-knowing, and He is. His ways are higher than our ways, and yet, even though at times it feels like God is delaying in answering our prayers, He still encourages us to keep praying with persistence and passion. And that is the parable that we're going to be looking at tonight. It's in Luke chapter 18.
You end up in prayer, if you think about it, you say, but not my will, but your will.
If it's your will. Yeah. I agree. And it's also a great a cappella song. Not my will, but thine. Luke 18, verses 1 through 8. This is what it says. And he told them a parable to the effect that they ought to always pray and not lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected man. And there was a widow in that city who kept coming to him and saying, 'Give me justice against my adversary.' For a while he refused. But afterward he said to himself, 'Though I neither fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will give her justice, so that she will not beat me down by her continual coming.' And the Lord said, 'Hear what the righteous judge says. And will not God give justice to his elect, who cry to him day and night? Will he delay longer over them? I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" This is the parable of the persistent widow. And before we get into the explanation of what this parable is talking about, I think it's important to know what immediately came before this parable. At least in my Bible, the subheading in chapter 17, starting in verse 20, talks about the coming of the kingdom. And in this section, Jesus talks a lot of when the Son of Man comes, and it is, it's full of kind of doom and gloom type of things that are happening. Chapter 17 is dominated by warnings of doom and sudden disaster, culminating in a gruesome image of death and corruption. If you look in verse 37, it says, "And they said to him, 'Where, Lord?' And he said to them, 'Where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather.'" Like I said, kind of gloomy omen here. Where the corpse is, the vultures will gather. And our parable begins right after that. And he told them a parable after he said that teaching. The point that men always ought to pray and not lose heart. It says it right there, verse 1. He says that he told them a parable to the effect that they ought to always pray and not lose heart. No matter how bleak the times look, even if all the world seems to be barreling towards doom, the righteous men and women must persist in prayer. Why do you think, I guess I'm making an assumption here, but I think it's a fairly good assumption, that at least for me in my life, there are times where I feel very close to God, and that in my prayers, it feels like I'm talking to an old friend, or a trusted advisor, or to a father figure. And then there are other times where I feel very distant from God. And so then my prayer life kind of ebbs and flows. Certain times of my life I feel like, man, I'm praying all the time. And then there's other times where I look back on my week and go, I don't know if I prayed at all this week. Why do you think our prayer lives have that ebb and flow to them? Those ups and downs. Phil?
Even in our relationships with our spouse and with our friends, that ebb and flow comes as well. There are times that we are closer to each other than there are at others. And so I think that's just a normal human frequency.
I'm normal. I don't know if I've ever been called normal now.
Well, you think about it, and that's exactly how it is. Even the spouse relationship, it comes and goes, better and worse at times, and could be, maybe she cooked something bad that wasn't very good.
Oh, man.
That doesn't happen in my house. Surely not. Any other thoughts? Why are her prayer lives kind of ebb and flow, Missy?
I think we get distracted, kind of like what Rob was saying. Just, you know, if we were just praying, we can get distracted, but life distracts, and we just lose our focus. Or we, as this verse tells us not to do, we get tired and weary and just like, I think it's distraction and weariness. And that kind of goes along with what Phil was saying. That's what happens to our relationships. We get distracted from spending time with one another. We get weary of somebody else's behavior or whatever, and it causes distance between us.
Jared?
I think sometimes we're tired of the end result. Like in chapter 17 here, he was telling them that you're not even going to be able to see it when the kingdom comes. And so here they are searching for it. And in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, the people are sitting there thinking, well, he said there's going to be a resurrection. When is it going to be? They thought it was going to be in their lifetime.
Yeah.
They couldn't see the end of that either. And a lot of times we can't see the end of it.
Yeah.
But like the widow, we have to continue until there is an end.
Yeah. We were very results-driven people. Sometimes that works in our favor, and other times, when we can't see the end, we're very prone to distraction or monotony. For sure. Phil?
I've always wondered this, and I don't know if anybody has an answer, but why did Jesus use the example of basically a wicked judge?
I was just going to say the same thing. I'm confused.
When it's
Yeah.
referring to God, I mean, in the story. So why does he use a wicked man who doesn't fear God or fear man as an example?
That's why I chose this parable. Because it has got to be one of the most obscure parables of the bunch. Either that one or, again, I think something akin to this would be the shrewd servant, right? Where it's just like, this is a terrible story. Like, why are you telling this to your disciples? And they're like, why is the judge here this terrible man? Well, let's talk about the judge. In the scenario here Jesus describes would likely be all too familiar to anyone living in the first century. The highest religious court in Israel was what would be called the Greater Sanhedrin. It was comprised of 71 judges over the entire country, and all religious leaders. They were all religious leaders, and they were deemed experts in the Old Testament law and oral tradition, and their power was oppressive and often unjust. This Greater Sanhedrin was the mock court that condemned Jesus to die, and so I mean, if you just see the corruption in that one case, you can kind of extrapolate that out to just this is kind of how they operated. But in larger cities, they each had their own ruling bodies known as lesser Sanhedrins, which were comprised of 23 judges. And typically these city judges, or the lesser Sanhedrin, they were extremely influenced by both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and so their court system. If you want a good example, just think of our political system today. That it's very influenced by these different parties, these different political parties, and so it became really a game of politics. And so these lesser Sanhedrin courts were typically very prone to harsh and hasty judgments. But besides the greater and lesser Sanhedrin, there were other judges in the country that were appointed by Rome. These Roman local magistrates and village judges, they were the ones who would be trying criminal cases, not just breaking the law of Moses, but actual criminal theft or murder and stuff like that. And typically these judges, these Roman judges, were the worst of all. They were lacking in any type of morals. They were paid large sums of money out of the temple treasury, even though they were Gentiles, and Jews regarded them like they would tax collectors, that they were the worst of the worst. They called them robber judges. Okay, so if that kind of gives you an indication about how these people thought of these judges. They were robber judges. And it seems like the judge that Jesus is talking about here would be one of these Roman judges. It says here, it says it twice, in fact, that there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected man. That second descriptor could have been said of any of these three types of judges, but the first one that said that he didn't fear God tells us a lot about him. That he was completely indifferent to the needs of the people or their just causes, and he probably became a judge because he loved money or position or both of these things. He's called an unjust judge. And he would deprive people of basic human decency. Yet, this parable is told to teach a positive lesson about God. And I think that's where we get confused in this parable of like this is a terrible representative for who God is, especially if we want to get the end result of we ought to always pray and not lose heart. So then the widow enters into the story here. It says there's a widow in verse 3 in that city who was coming to him and saying, "Give me justice against my adversary." Someone apparently had done something to her, defrauded her, stolen from her, and we know that she was destitute and alone. How do we know that? Because the courts were a strictly male thing. The courts were exclusively, they belonged to the men. And the fact that she came to the judge meant that she had, that her husband was most likely dead, besides being called a widow here. But it also meant that she had no brothers, or a brother-in-law, or a father, or son, or cousin, or nephew, or any type of male relative who could be her advocate to go to the judge. And so this is not just a widow, but someone who was completely alone. And the fact that she's coming to the judge would have been a huge faux pas, not according to the regs and regulations and the customs and culture of the time. And so she represents someone, those who are dirt poor or powerless or helpless or deprived or lowly or unloved or desperate. And Jesus uses this widow because as far as the Old Testament law goes, her case should have been very clear cut when it comes to care for the widows. The law is actually very explicit on this point. In Exodus 22, verses 22 through 24, it says, "You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless." Rod, you had your hand.
Unjust. He just says a judge. And I think maybe she came because he didn't have an agenda. He didn't fear God, he didn't fear man. I mean, he didn't have an agenda.
did say verse 6.
You didn't read far enough.
Mine says unrighteous judge in verse 6.
That's an addition by GSD.
I was thinking, maybe he didn't have an agenda.
He doesn't have an agenda?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if he doesn't fear God and he doesn't fear man, he wouldn't be doing favors for anybody else.
Yeah. So, what does your verse 2 say?
There was a judge.
You said the judge.
Yeah.
In verse 6, it
No.
says just.
No.
What
What is
people thought.
the whole of verse 2? Read verse 2.
He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought.
Okay, interesting. So the ESV says the neither feared God nor respected man. And so, what translation is that, Rob?
NIV.
It seems like the NIV there has more of an idea of like they don't care what people think about them. And that's interesting. I wonder what that word respected in the ESV means. Is it talking about? Go ahead.
For the respect of men,
Yeah.
it's intrepo, to shame one, to be ashamed, to reverence a person,
To shame.
or to reverence a person.
Okay. So I mean, I can see how you can go either way with that. Then. To shame a person. That's I think how the ESV is attaching this of like this judge does not respect other people. He doesn't fear God, which that's obviously not a good thing. But the fact that he doesn't respect man, or he has no care for man, not just about their opinions of him, but the fact that he doesn't really care to treat other people well. So, I agree, Diane. You shouldn't have been a judge, and that's why I say that he either wanted the money, or he wanted the position, or both of those things, but he didn't get into it so that he could be, a defender of the people. At least that's how I take it. Jerry, did you have anything?
Well, I was just wondering, it doesn't specify whether this was a Roman judge and a Jewish widow, or if it was a Jewish judge and a Jewish widow, or what the deal is. But the fact is, the judge in those days, and even in today, in a lot of places, if you don't have any, if he doesn't see any gain for himself, he just keeps putting you off.
Yeah.
Hoping that you won't come back.
I need to line his pockets a little more. But like I said, this should have been a pretty clear-cut, open and shut case here of someone who was defrauding a widow, which it's a protected class here. And I mean, in Isaiah 1 verse 17 it says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause." Now, God has always had a soft spot in his heart for the widow and the fatherless. But this widow came back again and again. She seemingly she wasn't asking for special treatment here, only justice. She wanted justice, and the judge was not willing to give that to her, and so she comes back again and again. And the turning point in verse 5 says, "Yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will give her justice so that she will not beat me down by her continual coming. That word, does anyone have it translated differently other than beat me down?
Mine says wear me out.
Wear me out?
Weary me. Mine says weary me.
Weary me?
Attack me.
What was that?
The NIV says attack me.
Attack me.
Wow.
Trouble.
Oh, this is
Interesting.
interesting in the New American Standard. The footnote says, hit me under the eye.
Yeah.
That's weird.
So the term is that for with what the ESV translates "beat me down" is a boxing term. So the "hit me under the eye" is right on the money. The Paul uses the same word over in 1 Corinthians 9:27, where it says, "I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others I should be disqualified." That idea of boxing, of disciplining your body. There, it's the same idea of being beat down here. And so the idea, at least the imagery that we're getting from what Jesus is saying here, is that the woman's pleas here were like a verbal beating. She was so persistent and so passionate in her cries for justice that she wasn't merely annoying this judge, she was causing pain to him by her pleas. And she defeated the judge through sheer persistence. So what does it mean? What's the point of this whole parable here? And we get the meaning from the beginning, that we ought to always pray and not lose heart. But the point Jesus is making is about a particular kind of prayer. All of the lead up is talking about the second coming of Christ, that judgment will happen and that things will look bad, and that during these times that we need to pray more fervently, not less. That God is nothing like the unjust judge, and if such a depraved judge can be persuaded by sheer perseverance, it says, this is what the ESV translates it as, will not God give justice to his elect who cry to him day and night? If such a bad judge can be persuaded by this widow's constant pleading or verbal jousting with him, will not God give justice to his elect who cry to him day or night? And so we can know that God does not delay justice out of apathy or indifference. It's not that God doesn't care. He delays justice because he is merciful. In 2 Peter 3, verses 8 and 9, it says, but do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient towards you, not wishing any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. The point of this parable is not the fact that our God is like this judge, but the fact that our God is nothing like this judge. And yet this judge was still defeated by persistence. And if an unjust judge can be defeated by simple persistence, then what should our attitude be in our prayer lives towards our God, who is infinitely just and infinitely loving? The parable ends with, nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? The question ought to provoke us to self-reflection. It's an encouragement to hold fast and to keep praying. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58, it says, therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Or in James 5, 7, and 8, he says, be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and late rains. So also, you also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. And that's the parable of the persistent widow. Any questions, Karen?
The widow herself, you know, she is so persistent, and it's because she has nothing else. There's nothing else she can do. She's desperate, she's destitute, but be persistent and keep going to the judge. And, you know, her only hope is that he would help her. And he does.
It seems like very literally her life depended on it.
Scripture that you read.
James 5, 7, and 8. And the one before that was 1 Corinthians 15.
What is this last sentence? Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? I'm trying to wrap myself around that. Does that mean that will there be those who are still looking for him? Or expecting his return? Or continuing to believe in him? And not losing heart, the way it says in the first part of it.
That's what I take it to mean, is that, you know, what's the key point of the widow? She's persistent. And, I mean, obviously, his disciples took this to heart because we're sitting here today, right? I kind of see this, if you remember back to when we talked about the 10 virgins, right? That, you know, as time goes on, you know, our diligence should increase and not decrease, right? And I kind of see that as kind of the same lesson here, as he just was talking about the second coming, and Jerry, you made a great point about the Thessalonians, that same idea of like, when is he coming back? When is he coming back? And they thought that it was going to be very soon, but obviously.
So they just got lazy and quit doing anything.
Yeah. And we can be tempted to do the same thing. That's why I wanted to talk about prayer lives tonight. So, what verse 1 had to say, I think, is the takeaway. That at all times, and especially as times can continue to move on, and as things might look very doom and gloom, we ought to be praying more, and our persistence in our prayer and our faith and our devotion to God should go up and not down. You guys have a sub next week. I expect you to be on your best behavior. We are going all over the place. I think we're actually going to be working that day. But anyways, so Dan's going to be teaching next week. Yeah. Troy?
We have an example of someone who prayed 3 times to remove a thorn. Evidently, he didn't get what he wanted.
Yeah.
He accepted the answer no and went on. How is that with persistence? Is there a point where persistence can become annoyance or refusal to accept the answer if it's not what you want? I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah. I think that comes back to your heart, as far as
are you wanting God's will done regardless? Because we have a lot of things that we want, or what we wish we had, or in Paul's case, things that he wish he didn't have, that God would take away. But in Paul's attitude in that, when talking about his thorn in the flesh, I see the same attitude that Jesus had in the garden, of saying, hey, I don't want this, but if it's your will, then let it be done. Yeah. All right, let's close out with a prayer, and then we'll be dismissed. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time tonight where we can look into your word. God, help us to increase our prayer lives. There's so many different things that we can do, and we can get creative in how we can remember to talk to you, and how we can increase the passion in our prayer lives. And God, I pray that we would seek those out, that we would grow closer to you as time goes on, and not grow more distant. God, thank you for this avenue of prayer that you have provided for us, and that we can know that you hear us, and that you care about the things that are going on in our lives. God, help us to be patient as we petition you with all of the things that are going on in our lives, and the things that we want. And God, help us to have the right heart, and knowing that above all, we want your will to be done. God, thank you once again, most importantly for your Son. It's in his name that I pray. Amen.